Hey everybody, it's Ed. Before we start, I've got some brand new Patreon supporters I want to thank. Lisa Hillerns, Chris Kearney, Darren Gamblin, Joe Fitzsimmons, Rafael Mendez, and John Kinsey. All these folks signed up to support the podcast via Patreon, which is monthly or annual support. I just redid the Patreon page, so there are options to support on a monthly basis or on a one-time basis. But the bottom line is that Patreon is what makes this whole Mountain Prairie thing work. I launched the Patreon page a few years ago and really didn't have any expectation that anybody would sign up or want to support the podcast financially. But here we are a few years later, and this podcast and Mountain Prairie and all of its associated projects are my full-time job. And I really credit the Patreon supporters with being the foundation of the finances that allow this thing to operate and allow it to be a job. You can sign up for Patreon at as little as $2 a month, but if for some reason you can't afford it or you don't want to do it, no problem at all. The podcast is free. It always will be free. There are some cool benefits that come with being a Patreon supporter, but no pressure at all. But for those of you who do support the podcast via Patreon, I really, really appreciate it. It is what makes this whole thing work. So thank you, thank you, thank you very much. This is the Mountain Prairie Podcast. I'm Ed Robertson. My guest today is Cate Havstad-Casad. If you've been listening to the Mountain Prairie Podcast since the early days, then I'm sure you remember Cate. She first joined me on the podcast in early 2018 for a conversation about her life and career as a hatmaker and farmer. In late 2019, she was one of 4 amazing women who joined me on stage for a live podcast at Bozeman's Ellen Theater. And today, more than 5 years after that first conversation, she joins me once again to talk about her continued personal and professional evolution. Over the past few years, Cate's been working at a dizzying pace, focusing on creating and building several purpose-driven businesses. She's the founder and CEO of Range Revolution, the world's first regenerative leather luggage company, as well as the co-founder of Agricultural Connections Co-op, a regional food distribution business based in Bend, Oregon. Additionally, she and her husband Chris have continued to grow their organic farming business, and her hat-making business continues to grow and evolve in unexpected ways. And to top it all off, in 2021, Cate and Chris welcomed their first child into the world. So, we obviously had a lot to discuss. We started out by talking about how Cate thinks about her work today versus 5 years ago, and why she feels it's important to continue to take business risks, even after taking on the new responsibilities that come with parenthood. We talk a lot about Range Revolution and the Agricultural Connections Co-op, and Cate shares a ton of lessons learned from the process of founding these vastly different businesses. We talk about leadership and management, and Cate offers up some excellent books and resources that have helped her to grow and develop as a leader. We talk about fundraising, the importance of self-awareness, thinking versus doing, mentors, Wendell Berry, and our mutual love of hard work. Cate obviously has a very full schedule, so I appreciate her carving out the time to chat with me. Check out the episode notes for links to her businesses and all of the resources that she mentions. Thanks so much for listening. Hope you enjoy. My old pal Cate, I was looking back at our first podcast interview, and it came out in January of 2018, which means we would have recorded it in December of 17. And I was thinking about everything you've done since then and how my life has evolved since then. And it was like both of us were not completely, but very different people if you just looked at our resumes at that point. And so I was thinking, I mean, and on your end, you've had so many different business evolutions. You've had some of the best stuff in the world that can happen to you as a human happen, and also some of the saddest stuff in the world. And you've just been really so inspiring to watch from everything you've done and all the ways you've navigated, a really full life. And so first question is kind of a deep one, but if you had to think about that person back in December 2017 compared to who you are now, who's that person in 17 and who are you now?
What a big one to start with.
That is a big one. No warm up. No, we warmed it up though before we started recording. So
we did. I was thinking about that. So, okay, December of 2017, that's so wild. So I was 27 years old. Chris and I were not married yet. We had, just moved to our new farm in Madras that summer previous. God, who was I then? I mean, I was living in a shack with, with like the idea of, how we would build a house on this farm, what it would look like to build an intergenerational farm with our in-laws, what type of farm we would be. Havstad Hat Co was still operating out of my Airstream. So different, and I had this idea that has stayed with me. So I'll say Cate in 2017, I was on this path of creating a work life that was like cyclical, in that I didn't want to spend 12 months of my year just working on hats. I wanted to find a way to split my life so that I was, doing hat production for Havstad Hat Company for these months out of the year, leaving my summers and falls to really focus on the farm. And that was sort of the world I was creating. And I'm so glad I started that process then, because here I am now today, and my work life has just gotten more cyclical. I mean, there's more on my plate, but I think what I was developing then was the capacity to just delineate what areas of my life do I want to focus on. And you don't have to just focus on one. And I'm so grateful for that, because here I am today and I'm doing a lot of different things. They all feel almost of equal importance. And I'm just really grateful that I'm in this place getting to do all the different kinds of work that I'm doing. So I was setting the stage for that then, very imperfectly, but with, great excitement for all that was coming. There was so much I didn't know.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, is to look back and realize it's like you don't know all the stuff you didn't know, but you didn't even know what you should know. There's just all this stuff that's just, you would have never expected it. So, since then, gotten married, had a kid, started several businesses. And sometimes we were talking about this a bit before we started recording, when people have kids or as they get older, they can kind of become more conservative. I don't mean conservative politically necessarily, but there's more on the line, especially when you have kids. And there can be a tendency, I've seen it a lot, to kind of rein in the risk or rein in the effort that you're putting out professionally to focus it more inward on family, that kind of thing. But from my perspective, it seems, if anything, like you've gotten more expansive in your thinking. You're willing to take more risk. You've kind of ramped it up in a way that, in my experience, you don't see a lot of people do as they progress into adulthood and like all these responsibilities that come with it. Am I accurate in thinking with that? And if so, can you talk about that process?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because absolutely, this has come up in conversation recently, like Havstad Hat Co. I had spent at that point, what would have been like 5 or 6 years developing Havstad Hat Co. It was in like a really awesome and exciting place. And in the, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, it was like, I mean, things were just like really getting smooth and tight, predictable, and nice living with Havstad Hat Co. And then I decided to put a couple more really big endeavors on top of that and complicate things. But I mean, the through line has been Havstad Hat Co. has been an incredible way to support me, support us, support our family, while I've been able to build these other things. And I'll say that the birth of my son, Heston, we were talking before we started recording about the cliches of parenthood, the cliches of bringing a child into the world. And now I look at the future of the world of now I want a world for my son to live in where he gets to enjoy so much of what I got to enjoy. So in a sense, the birth of Heston has propelled my drive to make impact in the ways that I'm trying to make impact. I mean, I had very driven parents. My mom's had a very kind of focused career as a psychologist since she was very young. And my dad was always very entrepreneurial and extremely driven. And so I mean, I want Heston, my son, to grow up watching his parents work with the same sort of fortitude that my parents did. And, we'll get into some of the work that I'm doing, but I've got this pedal to the metal attitude. There's no time to waste. Like, my work has to be focused on impact because there's really no time to waste if we're going to turn some of this bigger shit around.
No, it's inspiring. I mean, I feel like you're doing a lot more than I am, but like when I had my first kid, I feel like it just really focused me in a way that I wasn't really expecting. And it's not like an overnight thing. Like for me, at least, it wasn't like snap your fingers and the baby comes out and all of a sudden I'm focused. When I look back now, almost 8 years out, it was very clear that was kind of a turning point. There's absolutely no way we're going to be able to cover all the stuff you've done in this podcast, but I've had a front row seat and it's been so awesome watching. But I was thinking we kind of maybe almost like work backwards and talk about the number one thing on your plate right now, or the thing that's most visible, which is Range Revolution. I'm so excited for that. And I've just been watching you work so hard on it. Can you maybe first of all, just explain what it is for people that aren't familiar?
Yeah. So Range Revolution, I started this project really in the winter of 2020. And Range Revolution is a leather goods company that sources 100% of its leathers from regenerative ranches in the United States. That's sort of the surface statement to what is Range Revolution. If I were to go one step further, what is Range Revolution? We are building market opportunities that increase returns to regenerative ranchers and incentivize best practices on land. So, when I started this in 2020, my vision was I wanted to build a luggage piece for hat people. And I thought I was building something for Havstad Hat Company.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I want to find leathers that align with how I live the rest of my life, my ethos that I live the rest of my life by. And as soon as I started to search for, locally sourced leathers or leathers from, a regenerative ranch, that's what kind of opened Pandora's box. And I learned that all of the hides from all the mid-sized processors that I know of in our region are all being thrown into the trash.
Wait, and so why is that? I mean, I don't understand that. Sorry, I'm very, my brain is very basic, but that just seems like throwing money in the trash.
Oh, it is. I mean, it's nutty. From a business perspective, it's absolutely lost opportunities. It's unutilized assets. Why? Well, globalization. What we've done is we have, built these economies of scale that actually reward the most damaging and largest economies of scale. So it's much easier for commodity leather systems to aggregate, say, 5,000 hides from a feedlot than it is to aggregate 75 from this processor, 300 from this processor, 500 from this processor. So we've just decided it's not worth the aggregation effort because we can get them cheaper from Brazil. We can get them cheaper from New Zealand. And we just have this giant globalized supply chain. And we've just kind of, like with a lot of things, we've just let go of these mid-size systems. So it's one of those stupid problems that I can't stand seeing stupid problems that have solutions. And a gift and one of my downfalls is I want to solve them. So the solving of this lost opportunity that could increase the margins for ranchers, which anybody who works in producing food, whether it's vegetables, meats, any whole foods, you understand that the margins of these businesses are so slim. And so anything that we could bring back in to recapture would make a world of difference in the economic lives of ranchers. And then if we can improve the economic landscape for ranchers, can they also have just more freedom of brain space to then be applying more of these regenerative practices, because it's really tough to get ranchers to think differently or experiment or try new things when everybody's just living on this impossible margin that currently the beef industry forces you to live on.
So when I hear all that, I'm like, if somebody just told me that after I read about it, I'd be like, yeah, there's a really good business idea there. And then I just kind of move on to whatever captured my attention next. And instead you're in the thick of it. And so where are you with the business right now? What what are your days like? Like, what are you specifically working on when it comes to the business? Because what are you like? Was that are you 2.5, 3 years in now?
Yeah.
So like, what's going on? Like where does the business stand?
So actually, this is like awesome that our recording is today, because today, before we recorded, I actually dropped off at the mail center my first corporate order. So Range Revolution's first wholesale order just went out the door this morning. So let's work back from there. So I just shipped out my first corporate order, which I think it's so poetic. The first order is actually headed out to a rancher in Michigan who's having a bull sale next week. And so he wanted 150 leather journals, crafted in our leathers with his brand on it. But what I've spent the majority of the past 2.5 years working on is just the supply chain. So if I want to, source and talk about regeneratively sourced hides, there's really only a few ranches to aggregate from that are a part of this land to market program that I've been aggregating hides from. Land to market is like the consumer facing seal for products that are coming from ranches that participate in ecological outcome verification. That's the Savory Institute's sort of ecological monitoring program. And so getting hides, from processor to tannery. We don't have a ton of tanneries left in the United States, so I'm working with a boutique family tannery in Wisconsin. And then figuring out manufacturing, which it was an awesome time to start a business in manufacturing, 2020 and 2021. And I was, I'm steadfast to not manufacture in China. So my options were the United States and Mexico, really. And so, we had a couple of false starts. Like we tried to start production with a USA manufacturer. It became evident very quickly that was not going to be a scalable option. So I went back out and started hunting. But when you're startup, when you're just like a gal with an idea and some leathers, none of those manufacturers really want to take you very seriously. So just to get anybody to take me seriously and take me on was a process. So I now have a secured manufacturer that I'm working with in León, Mexico. And then some of those relationships that I was just starting to cultivate with some of the USA manufacturers, now they're kind of more willing to take me more seriously. So we're exploring some of those USA domestic options as well.
And then you can negotiate the price a lot better too. Like, sorry, dude, you could have had a better deal early on if you had paid attention. Wait, so go back to something real quick. You said they wouldn't take you seriously. How did you get them to? How did you get the first one? Like that? Because I think that's a lesson that no matter what business you're in, what you're doing, like when you're new and you don't have a track record, that can be a challenge. So how did you work through that?
I'm super persistent.
Just don't give up.
I just don't give up. And one of the manufacturers who sort of on my goal list, we just circled up this past week, and he's in the United States. Yeah, he was saying to somebody else on the call, like, I mean, I like Cate because she's like a dog on a bone, like,
Yeah.
And they're willing to take somebody seriously because you're not going to make it. They see a lot of people with an idea, and those people come in and they come out pretty quickly. But here I am 3 years later, still as determined to work with him as I was, 2.5 years ago.
I think that's, I was talking with my wife about this the other night, and, people were born with a certain amount of brain power. And, like my wife was born with a lot of brain power. I was born with medium brain power. And so the only thing I can do to fill that gap or try to fill that gap is the only thing I can control is work ethic. And so that's one thing I'm always just hammering into my girls, hopefully not over the top, but like, it doesn't matter how smart you are. Like that's, that's like what you look like or whatever. It's a thing, you're lucky one way or the other, but you can control the effort. And I feel like you've always done that. Like your work ethic is crazy. And I think I work pretty hard, but you're on a different level.
I think that the work ethic, like I have just a makeup that like I love to be in motion. I am action. And I think that's my parents. I think that's my parents leading by example for sure. I read this great quote recently. I actually just pulled it up because while I think it's work ethic and I think it's brain power, I think it's also principles. Like, and that's a work ethic thing. But this quote I read, let's see. As to methods, there may be a million and then some, but principles are few. And the man who grasps principles can successfully select his own methods. The man who tries methods and firing principles is sure to have trouble.
That's cool. I'm kind of jump all over the place because I got a million questions for you. But I think sometimes a thing that I hear from people is, you need to calm down, you need to relax, this kind of stuff. But what I've found through endless trial and error personally is that I'm at my best when I'm working hard. And
Yeah.
so, and I think if I take my hands off the wheel, like I will rest and I'll be a slob and I'll be very unhappy. And I'm not saying like I'm happy, like jumping up and down, smiling, but like there's a level of contentedness that comes from putting in hard effort. And
Yeah.
that's when I'm at my best. I'm not saying like I'm, manic or something, but it's just like when I work hard, I'm at my best. Is that how you are? And then how do you recharge? Because it seems like you go really, really hard, but it's not in an unhealthy way as far as I can see. So like talk about your relationship with effort and with extremely hard work. And then how do you balance that intentionally so that you can recharge?
Well, it's interesting because actually, my son is like I think if I was just on my own, like I'm more likely to run myself too hard. I'm more likely to be driven to take better care of myself. And, this word balance is very elusive, but like that version of balance for me is actually really driven by my son and by my partner. Like that recharge, like and I do push it too hard sometimes. And I have like lessons that I have to keep learning about noticing sooner when I need to take the pedal off the metal. But in general, like I'm not willing anymore to sacrifice time with my son, like time with my husband. So like that's right now really where my sense of recharge comes from. Like it's just such a joy to spend time with Heston or like working on the farm. Like I don't even designate any of the work that I do with the farm as work. It is our life. It is what provides for us. It is our deepest sense of purpose is this land. So my place of recharge is just to go for a walk on the farm or spend time with my horses or spend time with Heston and Chris. Like that's, and I really don't need a whole lot more than that. I do miss music festivals. I think I'd like to start getting back to like going out. I'm really excited to see you in Montana this summer.
Yes, at Old Salt.
But that's been my focus, has been just like my family and the farm, really.
How much do you sleep?
Okay, sleep. Right. Being a new mom, I really learned my lessons with how valuable sleep is by being so sleep deprived for so long in those early, many months of early motherhood. So now, I mean, I love to be in bed by 9 p.m. and I'm up at 5. Like I want and need my sleep, especially after experiencing that sleep deprivation for 8 months or more,
Yeah, I do too. That's what, and Theodore Roosevelt, who I'm weirdly obsessed with, as you know, like I heard his biographer referred to him as an energetic sleeper. And that's how I am, like strenuous sleeper. I love sleep and I need it or else everybody suffers because there's real problems happen when I'm sleep deprived.
Absolutely.
Another thing I'm curious about, and I'm just asking these questions because I need the answers for myself.
Yeah.
And so you're working, you're building all these different businesses. We hadn't even talked about the co-op. There's no way you can do all this stuff on your own. And there's no way anybody can build a successful, scalable business just as a one-man show. And so, you've had to develop teams and develop partners and all this kind of stuff. How has that process been? Because in the artistic hat world and to a point in your farming world, with you and Chris, like you do have to get help and there are people that come in, but it's not like you got to build build teams. I wouldn't think. I could be wrong there. How is that process of learning to lead, learning to build teams, learning to delegate, which I would imagine is tough for a personality like yours? Can you talk about that process?
Yeah, learning how to build effective teams is something I'm really interested in right now. And I've been a part of really effective teams over the past 5 years. I've also been a part of ineffective teams.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really thinking a lot and studying a lot about how you develop not only an effective team, but how I develop personally to be an effective leader. And honestly, I've been reading or just listening to on Audible a lot of business books about leadership. And it's just different depending on where you're at. If you're working in a nonprofit organization, there's a certain skill set and a certain temperament that makes sense in those organizations. In the types of businesses that I'm building, like I'm in startup mode right now, it takes a certain breed of person to function well in a startup mode or in even a farm mode where like you have to be really self-driven. You've got to be a critical thinker who's moving quickly on your feet. You have to be willing to roll up your sleeves and jump into the trenches with everybody else. Like you have to have a different level of fortitude, and you have to have a different level of like purpose that is like driven in faith. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes,
startup is a different kind of beast, and it has tested that faith. Like it has tested me, and I'm like a pretty confident person. I do feel like I'm a natural leader, but this whole process has really shown me areas that I have to actually soften to be a better leader. And then areas that I just have to be really discerning about what traits people need to have to fit well in what we're building. You know, so like say, for example, range revolution, like we need to have people who are willing to wear many hats in this early startup phase. And then as the organization gets more developed, you know, people who work for larger organizations who maybe aren't so entrepreneurial like will fit into that organization as it gets more evolved. But it's messy in the beginning. And then like the co-op, which we'll get into talking about what that co-op even is. I've been a part of this team developing this food cooperative distribution business. And what's awesome about that team is everybody has their kind of past expertise they're bringing to the table, but everybody is very equally driven by the same purpose that is much bigger than our single career goals. There's a bigger goal we're all working towards together, and that's driven the successes of that group.
Two more questions about that, and then I want to talk about the co-op in detail. You mentioned reading leadership books. Do any come to mind that have been especially helpful or useful or making you think in a little bit different way?
Well, what I hated about the thought of being a CEO originally was like, I don't want to be this like top hierarchical person who then like delegates to these people. Like I want people who are also leaders. And so a book that I read, Simon Sinek's Leaders Eat Last.
Yes.
A lot of what he talks about is actually how you develop fellow leaders. And that's what I'm interested in doing. You know, like that's the temperament of people that I'm looking to work with, is people that are going to develop to be leaders alongside me. I would rather be looked at as co-conspirators than kind of this old school model. You just still need to have some like delegation of roles and whatnot. And you need to have decision makers, because I think both of us understand situations you can get into where if nobody makes a decision, then no decisions get made. But I'm interested in developing fellow leaders.
Do you ever follow the Navy SEAL named Jocko Willink? He's like a leadership consultant, author, all that kind of stuff. Do you ever pay attention to his stuff?
I do, not all the time, but I do.
He, you know, when you look at him and hear him and see him, you know, if you just were glancing at him, he's like a caricature of what people would think is a Navy SEAL, you know, but a lot of what he talks about is that exact same kind of thing. And he's written several leadership books all about, you know, delegating responsibility and taking indirect approaches. And I think you'd like some of that stuff. His book, Extreme Ownership is a great leadership book.
And what's funny about leadership is there are these skills that people refer to as soft skills that like, they're not soft at all. It's really hard to master yourself, master your emotions. It's really hard to identify when you're letting fear or anger like drive your decision making, or, you know, to not just be in like a fight or flight response when you're in the trenches of startup. Like those skills as a leader, as a CEO, I say this stuff because I have like failed on my way, and I'm very much in process of becoming a better leader. So some of these early years of working with people, it's been trial by error and just realizing like, oh, this is an area I really need to focus on developing just as much as I'm developing our supply chain and designs and manufacturing. Like I'm currently in a chapter of really working on my skills in that sense of leadership and team building.
Well, I think in my limited experiences, you can get better at it. I think some people were born natural leaders, just like we were talking about with the brain power. Some people were just born leaders, but like a person who's born with mediocre leadership skills, if they work really, really hard at it and don't give up and find good teachers, you can get better. Like there's no question about it. And so I probably wouldn't have believed that years ago, but I do now. All right. One more question. And then I want to talk about the co-op. You've mentioned what you look for in team members and what you value. This is kind of a negative question, but is there anything that is a no-go? Like if you see a certain personality trait or certain tendency in a person, no matter how smart they are, no matter what they could bring, that's a non-starter. You're like, I want nothing to do with that. For me, it's arrogance. I hate arrogance. I refuse to associate with people that are arrogant. So that's my negative thing. What about you?
Well, arrogance. Yeah, I would say that's probably one of mine too. If there's any hint of dishonesty, for sure. Yes. And then I would also say I had to learn this one, someone who's not very good at direct communication. Like especially when you're a part of small teams and you're in a startup mode, and just a general ability to control emotion. Like there's a time to get open and be real. And then there's a time to do this processing behind the scenes and come to the table when you're more fully formed. So I would say those two things I've really had to learn, like somebody who has like decent emotional kind of composure, and then also clear, direct communication, because nothing is worse than if you let problems fester in the background and you don't address them, when a lot of these problems are just like normal communication things. So those are two things I look for.
We were just talking about the festering thing before we started recording. So the co-op, I can't remember when, but we spoke on the phone when that was just an idea that you had.
Yeah.
And you saw this opportunity.
How do I raise money?
I was like, so you must have just discounted everything I said and then found a smart person because you made it happen. Talk about that project, because I thought it was so cool when you first had identified it. And then next thing you know, you send me a text and you're like, yeah, it's done.
When we were in Montana all together and we did the live podcast in Montana, which was so much fun.
That was awesome. Thank you again for doing that.
Oh my God, anytime. But I forget how the question was posed, but it was something like, what's the missing link or something like that? And that was like distribution. Like I've just been thinking for so long about how distribution is this place that needs our focus in order to improve opportunities for all farmers and ranchers. And so we'd worked with this distributor in Central Oregon. It's called Agricultural Connections. It was a single, member LLC owned by this woman. And we'd worked with her for many years. She was the reason Chris got his first wholesale potato contract. And so we'd grown up with Agricultural Connections as a farm. And she was just at this point where she was ready to be done with the business. And we all identified that it would be a big problem if that distribution mechanism ended up in the wrong person's hands. Because what made that distro so special was it was the only distro that focused on local organic food systems or sourcing from local farms, first and foremost, then filling in with, say, produce from the valley. So essentially, a group of us came together and we're like, look, we have to buy Agricultural Connections. How are we going to do that? And then that started the whole process of, what do we want this to look like? Are we all going to be partners in an LLC? Are we turning this into a nonprofit? Do we want to create a cooperative? And we walked down those paths and really looked at the pros and cons of all the different ways of going about it. And the best path forward seemed to be create a cooperative entity. And so we did that. We created a cooperative entity. We purchased Agricultural Connections, the LLC, and then we placed it into this cooperative ownership.
Two questions about that. Define cooperative for folks, because I think everybody's heard the word co-op.
Yep.
And I had Cole from the Old Salt Co-op. And then I think it might be a misuse of the word, but REI says that they're a co-op.
Yeah, they totally are.
They really are. All right. So anyway, explain co-op. And this coming from the guy with the MBA who should know all this stuff.
No, this is, I mean, it's pertinent that you even brought that up, because as we were going and talking to different financial people or lenders, like a lot of people don't understand cooperative, which made a lot of this difficult in the beginning, but we were stubborn about it being a cooperative. I mean, broad stroke, a cooperative is like an entity that is owned by its member owners. And then you get to decide, who are your member owners? I mean, so REI as the example is great because when you become an REI member, you are technically a member owner and you get your little dividend, right? And yeah, what Old Salt is doing is awesome. So much of what Cole and his team are working on in Montana is so parallel to all the work we're doing here in Central Oregon. So for us, our cooperative is owned by the producers, so the farmers and the ranchers of Central Oregon who use the mechanism. It's owned by the employees of Agricultural Connections, and it's also owned by the buyers. And we decided that was an important thing to do because we want the buyers, so primarily restaurant owners, chefs, it could be a grocery store, it could be an institutional buyer. Those people are incentivized to be member owners and then use that mechanism more because they have a say in things and they are a member owner.
Got it. That makes sense. And how did you raise the money? Talk about that, because I think that's always a challenge, with any kind of business is the finances. And so I know people be interested to know how did you get the money together?
Yeah. Oh man, I've been such a student of raising capital the past 2 years. Like really it's a part-time job for me right now, both for the co-op and for Range Revolution. Two very different kinds. Well, similar, but for the co-op, philanthropic people who are invested in our food systems, who wanted to give money to make this happen. If we had gone the nonprofit route, it would have made the funneling of that money easier, but there's a lot of other roadblocks and things we didn't want to deal with on the nonprofit side. So the cooperative side of things, we have some institutions that have kind of been pass-through mechanisms for us. So EcoTrust, which is they're based in Portland. I was a part of their Ag of the Middle Business Accelerator program years ago. They're awesome. They kind of provided this pass-through mechanism so we could take more or less donation money. So a philanthropic person can donate, essentially, pass it through EcoTrust, which is the nonprofit, and then they give us that money with like a low to almost non-existent interest rate. And that's how we've approached it that way. We are now looking to raise some more funds to actually expand some of the operational capacity of the cooperative distro. And we're looking into a couple of different social finance firms that would same thing, be kind of giving us below market rate interest loans.
And so in fundraising, both for this and for Range Revolution, why are you good at it? Like, why are you able to make that happen? Because there are a lot of people out trying to raise money all the time. Some are good at it, some aren't. What makes you good at it?
Well, good question. I wouldn't be so bold as to say I'm good at it yet. Like I've had some wins and I still have a lot, a ways to go. I think it's that same reason with everything else. Like I'm like a dog on a bone, I have the fortitude to keep trying. And also this isn't a scheme. Like these are purpose-driven initiatives. And I think I have a way of helping people see what is such an awesome opportunity. Like the world is filled with people with capital who want to put that capital to work. And I just love showing people incredible opportunities in which their money would catalyze the betterment of communities, the betterment of ecosystems. And so I've really kind of made it my job to learn how to do this.
How much time and effort do you put into building the relationships with people that you may be approaching versus just, cold calling or whatever? I mean, is it, and I think some people who aren't in the world or in this world or wherever, they could think that maybe that when you say networking, that comes off as kind of slimy or something. But if there's one thing I'm good at, is networking, and I don't think it's slimy at all if done for the right reasons. So are you developing relationships with these folks before and after and during? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of the relationships, are really long time relationships. And the reason they're willing to give money is because they've known me for a long time. They know my track record. They know my fortitude and they trust me. even if they don't know that much about the project, they're just like, if you say this is what's up, I believe you. And then the newer relationships I've been cultivating, I mean, I've been developing a lot of these funder relationships for Range Revolution over the past 6 to 8 months. And then it really matters that if those people believe in you, that they also use sort of their relationships to introduce you to other people. So everything in business, I can equate every success that we have had from Havstad Hat Co to Casad Family Farms to Agricultural Connections to Range. It's all about the relationship. So I take those relationships really seriously. And it's not from an extractive place. I really look at people as co-conspirators, and everyone's got a role to play in this. Like, I don't have capital, but what I've got very strong relationships, networks, and a strong track record and really awesome projects to bring people into. And then you've got people on the other side of things. They might be, they've sold their companies. They're on this other side of life, and they're just looking to like do good. And everyone has a place to play. You have a role to play, Ed, and you play that role so beautifully in being a connector and a storyteller. So I just look at money that way.
Well, and I think what you said earlier about what you're, for lack of a better word, what you're selling, you fully believe in it, and it's making the world better. And like, I think about when I was selling ranches to rich people versus when I was selling conservation solutions to funders. And I was so much better at the sales pitch, and almost like it didn't make me nervous at all to go in and ask for $1 million or $500,000 or whatever from some fancy funder, because I fully believed in what I was talking about, and I knew it was making the world better, versus some fancy ranch that some rich guy's looking at, and I'm trying to tell him, there's really big trout in that trout stream, like, who gives a shit, like, I don't know. I'm not trying to trash people who are really good at selling ranches, because that is a skill. But like, for me, the whole sales thing was different when I actually gave a shit about what I was selling, if that makes sense.
The more time you spend also in the startup world, you see where capital's flowing, and there's so much dumb shit being funded, Ed, like, it blows my mind. And so with that perspective, I'm like, everything I'm working on is freaking awesome. Of course you should funnel money this way. But it's also about knowing who these people are and what their goals are. Like, are these people looking to have, a real community or ecological impact, and the ROI is not a concern? Because that's a different kind of value proposition. That would be the cooperative. So there are people who I approach about the cooperative that don't need that big ROI. They see value in a different way of building resilient, decentralized local food systems. And then in Range Revolution, I mean, I have no shame in saying I'm building a scalable company that's going to be very profitable. And so I have that side of the story to talk to certain funders about the ROI potential of this project, while also being like, well, we also need to make sure that the ecological and social platforms, they're weighted just as heavily as that financial ROI. So just differentiating, like, who's profit driven, who's value driven, and then knowing how to communicate to their values.
Yeah, I think that's super important, is knowing your audience, and that every pitch is different. There's no one size fits all for that kind of stuff. So, I mean, you've just been doing all this stuff. You're learning all these lessons. And for me, at least, one of the best ways I learn lessons is by screwing up and making mistakes. Are there any mistakes that you've made that you'd be willing to share, that looking back, in the time it may have been no good and you're beating yourself up or whatever, but when you look back on it, you're like, that I'm glad that happened because I learned? I mean, and if you don't want to share any, that's fine, no problem. But like, if there's any, I think it's important for people to hear that, because they might be listening to this like, oh, she just got it figured out. She's got the magic touch on this stuff. I can't do that. Whereas you've made just as many mistakes as anybody. Anybody who's doing this kind of stuff is making mistakes, period. So can you share any examples that come to mind?
Yeah. Well, let me start off, like this spilling of the beans, with a quote that I actually have pinned up here in my office. And it's, many a false step was made by standing still. So no matter what, if you're a person who's driven by action and you have momentum, the false steps are inherent to the journey. So get used to it, right? And just get up faster. When I placed my first order for leathers for Range Revolution, I was just so eager, so excited. I was like, I'm going to build this one product. I need 10,000 square feet of leather. And I took a lot of my early stage capital that I had, and I spent a large chunk of it on leathers. And this was, the systems were still developing. So actually I'm still working through, I'm just working through the tail end of that initial order. And there were a lot of mistakes that were made. Like there are a lot of unusable hides, and it's caused some problems on the manufacturing side, having to like cut around certain flaws. Even though we're embracing flaws, there were some flaws that like really are unacceptable. I just didn't really know when I placed a 10,000 square foot leather order, ultimately what our collection would become. So that was a pretty large and bold jump to make right off the bat. At the same time, it gave me this like, huge stash of leathers to go through and do development with for the last 2 years. So that's just like a really kind of like boring, straightforward business one. And then the year, sometimes I choose words for years. I started doing this like, I think in 2020, maybe it was 2021. So like my year for 2021 was expansive. I think it was expanse. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I kind of took that to the max. So I have expanded what I am trying to work on and develop so much that it's been a process of refining. Even though I might have time in the day, and I time block, I'm working on this here and I'm working on this there. And I block my weeks out for these days I'm dedicated to Havstad, these days I'm dedicated to range. But what I didn't understand then was like, there's a difference between like your time bank and then your energy bank. And I would say a lot of the work that I'm doing with range and the co-op, it's really draining energetically. Like it's just systems, processes. It's like heavy. It's just heavy energetically. It takes a lot of me. So I think that's been one of the biggest mistakes that I've made, is like this overextension of self and then working to bring that back so that I can give like proper energy, not just time, proper energy to each task that I'm working on.
That's super important. And I'm way ahead of you in the age department, but the older you get, the more important that is, I think, the idea that you can just power, like, well, I can just power through for 4 days in a row or whatever. And that now, that sounds like such a damn old man thing to say, but like it really does catch up, and it digs a hole that's a lot harder to get out of. But I don't know, it requires discipline, to keep it steady, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's my word for this year is like not steady, but it's consistency. So it's like, I would rather have this kind of more even keel, energetic expenditure than peaks and valleys. So I'm really working on systems to develop that consistency of energy.
That's very wise. You're way ahead of the game. I wish I'd had my shit together like you did. How old are you? 32?
I'm 32. Yeah. And I mean, I say these things and I'm like, shit, if I had known this 2 years ago, if I'd known this 3 years ago, but I think that those things are really important to go through to actually embody these lessons. Like you can read this in a book. Like how many times have I heard someone say this on a podcast? Like I know, but like you have to live it really to, I think, embody the lesson.
Yeah. Reading all these books, I set a goal at the beginning of 2023. One of my reading goals was like I'm only allowing myself to read either one, no more than two, either self-help or productivity books. Cause I think those things you can get info out of them, but they can be a distraction. Like at the end of the day, it's doing and it's action and banging your head against the wall and making mistakes. It's not reading about it all day. So that's one question. That's another question I have for you. I've been doing a lot of writing on a writing project recently. And one of the things I was thinking about is that this term that you see it throughout history and throughout biographies of men of action, which I would call people of action. And like Theodore Roosevelt is almost like a caricature of that, of somebody who is just all action, all go, all the time. Yeah. And they accomplish a lot, but the downside is that they are kind of clueless when it comes to being self-aware. And it's almost like that lack of self-awareness is what allows them to be such people of action, because they don't sit around worrying about, did I hurt that person's feelings, or is this person going to think I'm stupid, and blah, blah, blah. They just go. But kind of the more they are on that end of the spectrum, the less they are on the end of the spectrum of being self-aware and being the kind of person you'd really want to be around. And then on the other end is people that sit around and think all day and they're paralyzed to actually take action. Like, where do you think you are on that spectrum? Because you're obviously very self-aware. You're thinking about things like leadership. You're thinking about words of the year. Like you obviously can spend productive time in your own head, but then you're also one of the most action-oriented people I know. Like, do you think my theory there is, am I right in my thinking? And if so, where are you on that spectrum?
Yeah, I think that I have in the past been kind of in that TR, like just charge mentality. And that works. I think when you're on your own, when I was just me, Havstad Hat Co, Casad Family Farms, pushing those forward, that was okay. But you end up in these situations where, yeah, you have to be more self-aware if you're going to be dealing with interpersonal relationships and team relationships. So I think I would rather be somebody who is given the temperament to charge and then learn to rein that in and become more self-aware and slow down and take in the landscape and chew the cud than to be somebody who is paralyzed and has a hard time making action. Because I think it's harder for that to change than it is to actually rein it in.
Yeah.
And like you said, like I think it's a matter of wisdom and time and like pushing too hard and then failing or having somebody give you critical feedback, which has been really hard and super important in my journey. It has been critical feedback about how I either handle a situation or communicate something.
Who are your mentors? Like who do you look to on this journey? Because it seems like you're doing so many different things, and you've got so many different interests, both business wise and just personally. Who can you name a few mentors?
Well, it's like, I've got some people who, I check in with on a business basis. I have a couple people who, when it comes to the raising of funding, there's been this fellow, Ricardo Bayon, who's been really gracious with dedicating some of his time to helping me figure out the fundraising side of things. Just understanding it's like a whole other language and negotiating terms and those things. When it comes to leadership, I'm actually looking for, I think I'd like this year to have like a CEO coach. That's something I think I'm really going to ask for this year. But like people who I look up to, I mean, I love Brene Brown and how she's a get shit done gal, but she also really fosters this, sense of how you need to be open and vulnerable in your communications. I mean, there's this woman actually, like, I don't even know if she knows who I am. I know who she is, but she's sort of a little bit of a hero of mine of how I see it, where I'd like to go in life. Her name's Sally Calhoun, and she's an investor in the regenerative agriculture space. And so these are mentors that I've learned through watching what they are doing, and I'm sort of emulating. So nothing that revolutionary. And I think we shouldn't try and recreate the wheel. We have a lot of people to learn from. So I find Sally Calhoun's approach to impact investing really inspiring. I come back to my parents a lot. Like I just, they're definitely mentors of mine and continue to help me see the big picture. Wendell Berry, gosh, we could talk all day about Wendell Berry, but like he as a mentor through his writings has been huge in my development of what I focus on.
Those are all great. And your parents, I've had the pleasure of getting to know them a little bit, and it's really they're awesome people. But then seeing how proud they are of you as the father of girls, when I was like, oh man, it almost gets me like teared up thinking about it. When you think about Wendell Berry, his name has been coming up to me like really an absurd amount in the last month. I mean, it's just kind of, and the thing is, like, I'll whisper this to you as if all these people weren't listening. I have read very, very little Wendell Berry. The stuff I have read is awesome. Like when he talks about in the one, It All Turns on Affection, and page like 3, he's talking about the idea of boomers and stickers. And I've used that in more of like talks that I've had to do. But if I had to read 2 Wendell Berry books, what would they be?
Well, I've got this one that is just a collection of his essays, and what is it called? It might even be on my shelf. It's not on this shelf. The Unsettling of America, made a huge impact on me. It All Turns on Affection also had a huge impact on me. And then just all of his collective essays, like the man is a writing machine. Also, I love to hear him speak. He is such a comfort to listen to. You can't go wrong. But I think it's called The World Ending Fire is the collection of essays that I have. And it's just, I turn to him a lot when I'm like looking at the world and where things are headed. And I feel like nobody's thinking with common sense. And then I read some Wendell Berry and I'm like, no, okay. Like there's really good humans who think in this common sense way that I think. And it's a comfort that keeps me going, because a lot of the work that I'm doing, again, it's systems work. It's rebuilding systems that we've let go of. And it's a lot of the stuff that he's been talking about since forever. The need to have this sense of place and community, and what are people for? I mean, he has a whole essay is like, what are people for? And that sense of purpose, but like rooted to place, that is something that on my most kind of exhausted of days of trying to get people to get it, I return to his writings.
That's great. Yeah, I've got so many books I need to read. I just started this really big one about Frederick Douglass. And it's like 1,000 pages, but it is so good. And I didn't know a damn thing about Frederick Douglass. I mean, I had maybe the first paragraph of Wikipedia knowledge of him. And so then there's Wendell Berry that I know I need to read, but I haven't, but I don't think I'd be happy just sitting around reading all day. So I don't know.
The book that I started reading, thanks to you actually, which has been awesome, I'm only about a quarter of a way through it, is Silent Spring Revolution.
Oh man.
Oh my God. Like, I mean, what a dense book. And same thing, like I knew of Rachel Carson, but like to understand more about her. Okay, let me back up. Mentor, Rachel Carson. Mm-hmm. People like that, like what I love about that book is it's a wonderful reminder that some of the most revolutionary movements, they are just started by these individuals. These are just people who cared deeply and worked extremely hard through extreme adversity, and their fortitude allowed us to be where we are today. And I think we are very much in the midst of a next revolution, like a next paradigm of conservation. And so to read a book like that and just remember who those individuals were that really pushed things along, like it can just be a couple people changing something. And that's just like the message people need to hear. People feel lost. Like, where do things get better? How do I contribute to turning things around? And like the co-op is an awesome example of just, 5 of us came together and we were like, we really need to safeguard this for the future of local food in this region. Mm-hmm. And then boom, you do it. Like it can be as simple as you see an opportunity to make impact and you just do it.
Yep. 100%. That book is really great for people. I mean, it's 800-900 pages. And I interviewed the author, Douglas Brinkley, a while back on the podcast. So people who want to get a sample of that can go. But she was basically a government employee for a long time and doing this writing stuff on the side just because it meant so much to her. And next thing you know, she's the advisor to JFK. I mean, it's wild. And she was not doing it for with any goal of being recognized as a revolutionary in the environmental movement. She's just doing it because she cared. And she did it long enough and hard enough that next thing you know, she's an advisor to the president and now the subject of one of Douglas Brinkley's books. It's really cool. Any other inspirational books or podcasts or movies or anything that I can put in the episode notes that people could watch or consume in some way?
I sent you, I don't know if I sent you his contact information, but I read Tony Momberg's book, Green Grass in the Spring, A Cowboy's Guide to Saving the World.
Yeah, that book arrived. I'm not sure if he sent it or his publisher, but it is sitting in my shed and it continues to come up. It's just an awesome book. So another book I need to read. And I've heard he's an awesome dude.
He's actually, again, to back up to mentors, I would say Tony and Andrea Momberg have become really important mentors in my life over the past year. And Tony, I mean, he is full of stories. He is full of witty one-liners. He's hilarious. He's a natural born storyteller. But his book, it really got me to, I mean, I'm spending all this energy and time. I'm being trained in holistic management, from the Savory Institute perspective. And, our evolution here on the farm and in this landscape in Madras, holistic management has been a lens to look at this farm, and it has really helped us to shift and evolve through what has been extreme climactic changes over the past 5 years. And the farm that we were when I spoke to you in 2017 versus the farm that we are today is totally different. Mm-hmm. But holistic management has been this sort of like center pillar that helps us make decisions. But what's hilarious is like, yeah, we could take all these concepts and apply it to how we manage land, but we don't often take those concepts and apply it to how we manage ourselves.
Interesting.
And a lot of what Tony does in that book is he is weaving these connections of the lessons of the land to the lessons of self. And just as much as we need to have these like, planned disturbances on land, and we need to have then, very thoughtful recovery periods in order to have ecological health, we need to have the same sort of mentality and system in ourselves. And so that's been really helpful in like catching myself. Yeah. And not applying that thinking holistically to myself.
Mm-hmm. No, that's cool. Yeah. I really want to read that book. Tony, if you're listening, I will read your book. I continue to hear great things about it. Any like podcast or anything that come to mind that might be good?
Oh, well, of course, Cate Havstad-Casad.
Podcast. She's so smart, man. She's just so smart. I don't understand. Again, all these cool people I meet, it just reinforces what I'm working with.
She and I were just in New York together, and that was just like so much fun. We actually we're going to record a podcast this coming Monday together, which I'm really excited for. And we were going to do it when we were together in New York. And ultimately I was like, can we just have like a catch up? And we were together for like, 24 or 36 hours. And we just didn't stop talking. It was just like, there's not many people that can kind of like keep up with me. And I would say, actually, I struggle to keep up with Cate. She's just like so smart, so curious, so wonderful to be around.
Yeah, she's great, man. She's that podcast. Everybody on there is so smart, as is she. So that's a good one. It's called, is it Mind, Body, Soil? Is that what it's called?
Mind, Body, Soil is the new name.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. I'll have links to that so people can listen.
Honestly, I've been like a little fatigued in the podcast world. Like really, Ed, I don't mean this just to like flatter you, but I listen to your podcast. I listen to Cate's podcast. There's this guy, Anthony Gustin. I listen to his, I think it's called like the Natural State podcast. And he's really into farming and food and nutrition. I can't really think of any other one that I'm like super excited about right now. I've been taking a little bit of a break from like audio consumption and really having fun. Usually I'm in my hat workshop when I'm listening to podcasts. And these days I've just been jamming out to music.
I think that's important. I've been doing the same thing. I've found even funny podcasts like Smartless or Conan O'Brien. It's just too much information going into my brain when I need to be chilling out or relaxing or letting my brain have a rest. And I've been doing the same with music and just kind of cutting back on the information going into my brain. So I'm with you on that.
It's tempting to consume and want to learn, especially when you're just like an avid, we want to develop and keep bettering ourselves. But like, then we kind of miss the point that it is that space, and it is those quiet times in which your thoughts really do get to take you away, and you really get to like ruminate on the things and develop thoughts. So that quiet or that space, which like music actually allows for me, that's become a really important, just step back from the consumption and just create, just be quiet.
Well, those are wise words, I think, to wrap it up. But seriously, I mean, when I started this podcast, I just had no idea that anybody would listen or anything would ever come from it. But like the number one great thing that's come from it is new friends. And like from the entire Robertson family loves you and Chris. And it's just been so awesome seeing everything you're doing and like getting to keep up with all your stuff and developing a really like a legit friendship based on real stuff and not just a lot of nonsense that dominates day-to-day life as you get older. And so I'm just a super fan of you and everything you're doing. And my wife, Kim, loves you. And I'm just so happy and proud to call you a friend. And I look forward to many more of these conversations.
Likewise, Ed, I'm so excited that I get to see you in Montana this summer. That's at the Old Salt Festival. That's going to be awesome and epic. And yeah, I mean it. Like your podcast is just such an awesome companion in a time where there's a lot of media that can make you feel really pessimistic. Like your podcast is a place that makes me feel nothing but optimism, because look at all these incredible people out in the world, just in their own way, like making impact and doing amazing things. Like those are the stories that I need to hear to keep going in my own way. So thank you.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I know your time is valuable, so it means the world that you spend it listening. If you want to support the podcast and help it to continue to spread and grow, there are a few ways you can help. Number one, pass it along to a friend or share it on social media. Word of mouth recommendations are the most powerful way for ideas to spread, so I'd love it if you could share the podcast with a few pals who might enjoy it. Number two, you can go to Apple Podcasts and give it a 5-star review. Good reviews encourage the Apple overlords to suggest the podcast to others. So there's a link in the notes if you'd be so kind as to give it 5 stars. Number three, you can support the podcast financially via Patreon, and there are exclusive benefits for those who do, including a monthly behind-the-scenes newsletter, Mountain Prairie stickers, live and recorded video chats with podcast guests, and much more. Number four, I've also got 2 emails that I send out. The first is my weekly email called Good News from the American West, which I send out every Wednesday. It's only positive news, something we can all use a little more of these days. And my other email is my bi-monthly book recommendations email. One email every other month with 5, 6, 7, or 8 books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The thousands of people on both of these lists will vouch for me. No spam or other funny business. And number 5, finally, check out my online store for Mountain Prairie stickers, shirts, and coffee mugs. I've got some really cool designs from Western artists with more on the way, so head to mountainprairie.com/shop to check it all out. I'd love to connect with you. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, so look me up on either of those platforms by my name or through the links on my website. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for your support.